So after watching CitizenCon and reading some comments from my last video about the Corsair as well as the Redeemer, a lot of players have asked about what I feel in regards to multi-crew and the direction that it's going in. Now, I will cover CitizenCon in detail, at least the parts that I found interesting, in another video. But I really want to touch on this because I think it's pretty important. Right now, multi-crew, in its current state and in its proposed state, is simply not cutting it. The most vocal issue that I've seen players having is that they don't like the idea of having to have a crew for their ship, that they purchased this ship and they feel like they should be able to fill it with NPCs or blades or whatever it is. They want to automate parts of the ship. They're not wrong in feeling that way because that was something that was pitched at some point. I have a hard time putting myself in that camp because I don't have a problem finding a crew, but I'm not stupid enough to think that that is representative of the majority of players in the game. So I have a genuine concern for people and their enjoyment of the game who do own these larger ships. But I don't think that NPC blades and NPC crews or whatever they are is the solution here. And people aren't going to like hearing that. They're going to say, oh, well, if I can't find anybody to play with, then why do I have this ship? And it's easy for me to sit there and say, oh, well, this is what you bought, LOL. But I'm sure a lot of the people bought these ships under the pretense that they would have an NPC crew or blade to shove in there. And according to this most recent post by CIG, NPC crews and blades are coming. But regardless of NPC crews or blades or any of that stuff, what is the core issue here? It's not that people don't want to actually do multi-crew roles. I think that is a very largely overblown and emotional argument you see on places like Spectrum or Reddit, where they'll say something like, oh man, who wants to sit in my boring turret gunner while I fly my cool ship around? Oh man, I don't know about you, but I never had a problem finding a gunner for my Warthog and Halo. I never had a problem finding a gunner or being a gunner for tanks in Planetside 1 or Squad or any game that actually has like a tank crew system. People love doing that. Usually being a gunner and filling those things up with the crew is the first thing that happens during a match. But for some reason in Star Citizen, we just can't find people who want to do that. And if they do want to do that, they try it, and then they don't want to do it again. Why do you think that is? You got your thinking caps on? Because it sucks. Alright, that's why they don't want to do it anymore. People initially want to do the multi-crew jobs. They want to do the engineering. They want to do the turret gunning. They would happily do that. But one of the big reasons why you can't find these people is because the ones who did want to do it have tried it, and they've come to the realization of what it actually is and don't want to do it anymore. And that's really the core issue here. But let's go ahead and say that they added an NPC crew. Well, how does that solve multi-crew? What incentive does that get me to put people into that ship and have it function? All you've really done is replace one problem with another. Let's talk about balance. Let's say you have an NPC crew. CIG implements the NPC crew, and it's not very good. It's actually so bad that it's almost pointless. Rightfully so, you complained about it, and they bump it up a little bit. That way it's not so pointless anymore. And now it's pretty okay, it's consistent. At that point, what is my incentive to put a crew in my ship? Now you're going to probably say, hey, well, because the players are going to be better, right? Okay, sure, they'll be better. But let's use the Hammerhead example, my favorite example. So is a Hammerhead with 7 players in it, is it going to be more effective than 7 individual Hammerheads with NPCs in it? And I don't see these being an issue for smaller ships like the Hurricane, the Scorpius, or the Vanguard. But as you go up in size and you scale other stats, such as, again, HP or whatever, suddenly firepower isn't as important as you would think it would be. So firepower is certainly a more small-scale thing to consider, and I don't see a Hurricane with an AI gunner ever being as good as a Hurricane with a player. So you'd always be better off bringing one Hurricane with a gunner instead of 2 Hurricanes. But when you start getting up higher to Perseus, Polaris, etc., that's where I think the issues are going to become prevalent. And this is all, of course, theory crafting, and theory crafting is fun. But hear me out. The sheer amount of effective health that having multiple big ships is going to bring to the battle alone is a massive incentive to use a lot of AI crewed multi-crew ships, regardless of how poor their firepower is. And I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying as that I'm against NPC crews or blades. I'm not. I'm just looking at it from a different perspective. A perspective of somebody who wants to just win, who wants to get the most amount of raw stats on the field into a battle. I do not foresee NPC crew or blades being as positive for the game as you might think it would be. But again, I'm not against it. And actually, I think at this point, it's mandatory. It's essential. Just given the way games are played by players now. Because you're going to replace one problem with another, and you're simply going to disincentivize players from becoming multi-crew players to begin with. You might say, oh, well, if they want to do it, you're at least giving them the option. At that point, you're just giving them a false option. Yes, they have the option to be wrong. Players who are competitive, players who are going to play the game to win, which, as we've seen from CitizenCon, this game's going to be pretty cutthroat in some ways. They're not going to do that. They're going to play to win. So they're going to bring 7 individual hammerheads with NPC gunners. So we haven't solved anything. Because in the end, multi-crew still sucks, and we're not doing multi-crew. We're just filling those slots with NPCs instead of players. So the proposal here, and I think it's the most simple one, I don't know why it hasn't been done yet, is just to make multi-crewing absolutely overpowered. Yes, that's right, I said it, absolutely overpowered. Because if you're going to put all those eggs in that one basket, then you better believe that that ship better be very difficult to bring down and very, very deadly to approach. And the only threat to a multi-crewed ship like that should be an overwhelming number of smaller ships or equally crewed big ships. Because unless that happens, it's never going to work. A serious player is never going to put all of his men and women in that ship just to have them become content for people in single-seat ships. What would you do? Let's give you another scenario. In the current state of the game, with the current state of multi-crew and the way they are, and even a proposed state coming up, you're in a PvP battle, and your rivals are out there, and they have a hammerhead. And in this scenario, let's say you both have 8 players on each side. Are you going to crew up another hammerhead, or are you going to crew up a Perseus or whatever to go out there and fight that hammerhead in crewed combat? Or are you going to bring, say, 8 Ions and Infernos to kill it? Well, you're probably going to bring 8 Ions and Infernos. And you're probably going to say, well, what's the harm in that? Okay, well, the problem with that is you're taking something that's easier to do, which is to get 8 individual ships that are single seat, and you're throwing it at a ship that has to coordinate with 8 other human brains to achieve one goal. And that is a far more complicated task. So if multi-crew was very good and was balanced in favor of the multi-crew ship, you would have to bring more than an equal amount of Ions and Infernos to kill the hammerhead, even if those ships are designed to defeat the hammerhead. This isn't meant to be realistic. This exercise isn't meant to be representative of what would happen in a real-life battle or none of that garbage. It's simple gameplay. And it's a simple math equation I've talked about before, which is 1 + 1 = 3. Unless a crewed ship acts like a force multiplier, a serious group of players is never going to use those things. Now, on the flip side, if their hammerhead is piloted by just one guy with an NPC crew or blade crew, whatever the hell they want to use, then, in my opinion, I don't really care what happens to the solo crewed hammerhead. It might as well be destroyed by one Ares, Inferno, or Ion, for all I care, because it's just one ship on one ship with no additional layers to it. And that's the balance concern I have with AI blades and NPC crews versus regular single-seat ships. Because you're basically turning a big ship into a single-seat ship at that point, so how do you balance it? But if we're following the logic that multi-crew is a force multiplier, instead of bringing an overwhelming amount of Ares, Infernos, and Ions, you would just bring one Perseus to counter the hammerhead. Because that would be the job of the Perseus, for example. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Since multi-crew is so cumbersome and still ineffective, I would rather just have multiple single-seat ships to do that job. That's really the problem here. Sure, doing it with multi-crew ships is probably going to be more fun But that is not enough. It can't just be more fun. It has to work. It has to be the way to do things. Because eventually doing the fun thing is going to get you owned by people who want to win. So ideally, the thing that helps you win should also be fun. But the point still remains. If you throw NPCs on those ships, it's not multi-crew gameplay anymore. There's no force multiplication. There's no added challenge of coordinating with other living human beings. You're just still playing solo with extra steps. And I'm not against playing solo. I don't think it's reasonable that in order for me to pull out a ship that I really like, I just have to have everybody online to crew it. Maybe that's just not in the cards for that day. And that's why I think, again, that these NPC crews and blades are essential to the game. The final concern I would have doesn't relate to combat, but relates to industry. If you could fill your C2, for example, with an NPC crew, how are you going to incentivize players to do hauling with a real crew? You'd have to pay the real crew. I assume you'd pay the NPC crew as well. But NPCs don't argue, they don't negotiate, they don't talk back. So just with my limited knowledge of it now, it just seems like I would always run a C2 with an NPC crew and get the most amount of payback for it. And the final thing I want to talk about is the difference between a human crewed ship versus an NPC crewed ship. Is the extra power going to translate to more than just firepower? Like, sure, it's easy to say that the turrets might be less accurate, they might fire slower, have a lower capacitor, whatever. You have lower damage on the turrets due to a variety of malices applied to them because they have a blade instead of a human. But what about other parts of the ship? Say, the shields, the maneuverability. Will you have less shielding because you have an NPC crew? Will you have less maneuverability because you have an NPC crew? These are all questions that I have. So yes, you can make an NPC crewed ship very bad when compared to a player crewed ship. And you should. I'm not going to budge on that. But how bad are you going to make it? How unfun are you going to make it for the solo player? Because you have to make it unfun. You have to make it unfair. You have to reward players being in the crew. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And as always, hop on our Discord. We can have a chat. You can talk to me anytime you want. Thank you for watching.